my name is Mel, and this year for Brickworld Chicago, I have brought my Picnic in the City. So this is a creation I actually did back in March. It started with the wheels from the Hailfile droid. I've been actually trying to get rid of all of my dark gray from my collection, just because it's a color I'm, not really fond of, and I actually prefer to use Blay. So I actually had thrown these wheels into a bin and was about to give them to a friend, and I asked them if they wanted the wheels, and they were like, well, Mel, do you know how much these things are online? And I checked the cost on Bricklink, and they're about like a crazy amount each, like $40 each or something like that. So then I said, well, maybe I'll hold on to them and make something with them. And they were like, well, let's be serious, Mel. Like, we know what type of building you do. You will never use these for anything. And I completely agreed. Like, there's no way I'm using anything Technic in any of my stuff. But I couldn't stop thinking about it for a few days. And I thought, well, if someone was going to use this beyond what it was meant for, which was Technic, what would they do? And I started thinking about a bicycle, and I've really admired vintage bikes, and I started imagining this scene of, in the 1950s, listening to Elvis, going to the park, kind of just like enjoying, the outdoors. And I started searching vintage bikes, and I saw this bike creator who took vintage bicycles and remade them so that they were, in working order. And I actually started to learn how to build a real bike in order to be able to, to start working on this. And so it's weird. I probably could build a real bike if you gave me all the parts for it now, just because of the amount of research I put into it. But yeah, it kind of just started with the wheels, and then I, looked into what kind of color I wanted to use, and I really wanted to make sure that it did stay vintage. It gave this feel of very classy old Paris, and I felt that the only way to really do that was to use either sand blue, sand green, sand red, something that wasn't very common and does also represent a vintage era of Lego, right? So I, just dug up my sand green and kind of just worked from there with the pieces that I had, and kind of just, added some fun things like using bow and arrows for the spew and, for the gear, and finding weird connections where the spew fits into that type of Technic piece, which completely surprised me. And for the seat, as soon as I saw the leather, it's called a tornado spiral spring saddle. As soon as I thought of it, the Ninjago sets had just come out with this color piece, and it was the first thing I thought of to use for it. And it's added that vintage look to it. And then after I had built the bike and obviously the lantern, because I had to support it in some way, I still felt like something was missing. So I started envisioning this picnic scene and wanted to build this basket. And I had this idea of using old minifigures from previous series that had the banana suit and the hot dog guy as actual sized fruit. And I was just going to do a regular basket, just studs facing out. But then I remember seeing this technique where a builder used minifigure hands as the sort of like the texture on a rooftop. And I thought that actually would be really cool for wicker on a basket. I wasn't sure if the idea would work. I ordered 1,000 minifigure hands on Bricklink, and actually at BrickCan Vancouver built this during public hours. And it took me 2 days. I still don't have feeling in my 2 front fingers because of the tweezers I had to use to put these in. But I really liked how the detail came out, and using the basket cloth from the Mini Cooper set, it kind of just worked out perfectly that Lego has released these really awesome parts around this time. I don't think it's something I would have been able to use or to make in a previous year. So I'm really happy how it came out. It's super fragile, so don't breathe too near it, but I'm hoping to work on an actual whole series of vintage bikes, and so this will probably be the first of many to come.
Okay. Yeah, and it's such an awesome build. There's so many cool parts in here. I really love the way you did this. So you mentioned it's pretty fragile. Did it take, several rebuilds to kind of figure out exactly how it would all come together?
Oh yeah, falling every few seconds. It's really trial and error, and it teaches you patience, right? It's very easy for a builder to give up and think an idea is a little bit beyond the means of what Lego can do. I still had hope, and I thought, the idea that I have in my mind, I know that it's probably not going to be possible, but let's just try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least I learned techniques from it. The bike does continue to fall unless everything is attached at the same time. So when anybody watches me setting it up, I have all of these water bottles around me just holding everything together, and then I take everything away once it's all connected. Because the majority of the structure of the bike is actually flex tube holding it together, there's zero connection of this to anything other than holding that wheel in place. So, it's fairly sturdy, but if someone bumps into the table, the center of gravity is definitely going to wobble and it's going to fall over. And actually in Vancouver at BrickCan, someone had taken a water ball before I was ready for it to be removed because I was still setting it up, and it actually fell over. And they felt really bad about it, but I'm used to rebuilding it so many times that it only took me a few minutes, but it is something that's a little discouraging while you're building, and then you kind of just become so insane while trying to do something like this that every time it falls, you just laugh. And then you're like, why am I doing this to myself? It's so much torture. But in the end, I'm actually like super surprised, and I even told myself, like, if no one likes this, I had so much fun building it. I think it was probably the most fun I've ever had with any of my creations. Even though there was frustration, I was still always telling myself, like, this is so cool. Like, I was discovering ways I've never used pieces before with, non-traditional Lego parts like flex tube and antenna and rubber bands and that kind of stuff, which is still, 100% purist, but it's not a traditional way of building a display, and definitely not a structurally stable one either. And so I'm glad that people can see the delicacy of it and admire it for that aspect of it as well.
Definitely, and I think it just turned out really beautiful and nice, and you won Best Artwork as well. I want to make sure we point that out, so congratulations on the award, because there's some stiff competition here at this show, so that's really awesome.
Thank you. Every time I come to any of these shows and I see, artwork is such a tough category because you can technically look at anything here and say that it is part of artwork. So I always have the most difficult time ever picking something for that category. So when I saw it there, I was really, really flattered, but also a little surprised because the people who I see get nominated for this category are people who I look up to. And so to be part of that as well is honestly quite an honor.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about the build. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks.